I'll share my screen. So as usual, I have a lot that I'm trying to cram into class. So I have a bunch of short videos. I just changed the settings so that they can be shared. And if you had a chance to look at the agenda, I think I'm going to stick to pretty much what I did on the agenda. So I kind of already just reviewed last week's class. We discussed the implicit biases that we all have. And I think if I haven't made that clear, everyone has implicit biases, no matter how conscious you are or how progressive you may be. There are things that may come out that you don't even realize. So the key is to, always be reflecting, always be kind of thinking of who your audience is and what could potentially be offensive without you even realizing it. And then also we discussed euphemisms in that essay, Language versus Lies, and certainly some of the examples from news that are happening currently. Did anyone have either maybe see any other news stories that had examples of euphemisms, or any comments or questions? One thing that I noticed, so again, I'm on social media a lot, and I noticed just within the last couple of days, maybe it's because of the sanctions, that there really hasn't been as much trolling as I remember seeing, like constantly negative kinds of like the other side supporting Putin and his illegal war. I haven't seen as much of that within the last couple of days. So I wonder if the sanctions and the closing off of communication has impacted those, as they're referred to as trolls, on social media, which is not that I'm saying it's good that that happened in Ukraine, but if the trolls go away, that's a good thing. So this week we're shifting gears a little bit. We'll still probably address some of these issues of implicit bias, also as known as unconscious bias, when we discuss these essays and the videos. But I wanted to just briefly go over the homework assignment, which is to interview a family member. And I want to show you, I did in this week 6 folder, I did post where you can submit that assignment. But I did, I have two submissions that I'll show you. One is just the essay, and then I'll show you the video. And you've already seen how to use Canva to create a video. So I'll just show you the brief video I created. But this is the example of the Google Doc, which is the essay. And Maureen, I see your comment. Interesting. You haven't seen much of it either, although you did see FIFA and UEFA are banning Russia from playing. That was in, what was it, the soccer tournament, which is huge. And that's, again, this idea of solidarity around that. And it is unfortunate that, innocent Russian citizens are getting affected. But at the same time, those sanctions are necessary for making an impact on the country. So family heritage, this assignment and the interviewing assignment, I'll give you a little background on that, how it came up. I was taking a grad class in public health, and the focus of the class was food and health. And since I'm a health and wellness educator, I wanted to get information about cultural traditions around food and how that impacts, diet and health outcomes. And the class was excellent. It was from UMass, and actually it was an online class too. But one of the projects we had to do was interview somebody from a different culture or had a different cultural heritage, and again, describe their food traditions and how it impacted their health. So my dad is Lithuanian, second generation Lithuanian. He's not from Lithuania, but his dad was. And so I interviewed him 5 years ago. So he was 81 years old. And in the process of interviewing him, I learned some things about my family that in my entire life I didn't know. And so this was interesting to me. One thing that I knew growing up was that, so my last name, Lawrence, was actually changed at some point. The Lithuanian name I had always been told was Jevrauskas, but nobody knew how to spell it. But the story I had been told is that when the family came from Lithuania to the United States, they changed the last name to Lawrence. Nobody knew why they chose Lawrence. It was just assumed that that was given to them, that, you know, it was an Americanized name. But I never knew the story. So that was kind of like, oh, somewhat of new information to learn about my dad saying that he didn't really know. All he was told was that they changed their name when they came to the United States. So I thought this was fascinating. And so, as I said last week, I had this new epiphany, this new discovery from my family, which was, let me share the screen so I can just show you. So my dad, who's right here, he and my mom's right here. So my mom's on the Italian side of the family, and this is me and my brother. They, since they're in their 80s, and I keep telling them more and more that I want them to write this stuff down because it's in their heads and I need to know it so I can write it down. But also, they're going through all these old files and like boxes of things because, again, they're getting older and I don't want them to leave me these piles that I have no idea what they are. Anyway, my mom was going through one of these boxes and she said to me on last Monday, oh, I found your grandfather's graduation certificate from grammar school. And I was like, oh, okay, that's odd that they would have something like that and that they shared it. And then she said, yeah, and his name was Jevrowski. And I was like, what? Because I had always been told, like I said, that they changed their name to Lawrence. Well, anyway, this kind of opened up a huge discussion. One good thing was that I found this, I never knew the spelling. My dad never knew the spelling. But with that certificate, I found out the spelling of his last name. So I started doing research on the internet and ancestry.com. So this is not an updated essay, but this shows like a little bit about my father, where he's from, Lithuania, and these are the stories that he told me. So I wrote it up into this essay form. But here's the addendum. Like I said, I discovered this last Monday. So this is my so my last name is actually Jevrowski, which is the Americanized version of Jevrauskas. That's how it's spelled. And on Ancestry.com, I discovered somebody had posted this photo. So this is my grandfather and his three of his brothers. My grandfather is right here. I'd never seen this before. My dad had never seen this photo before. And you can see this is like probably from the 1930s based on the cars in the background. But it's just kind of cool to discover this history. A little bit about my family. And now that I know the last name, I'm going to continue to research that. But so that's my family secret that apparently nobody really knew about. And then I found out, so my great grandfather's name was Leonis, Leonas, and they always called him Leo, referred to him as Leo, but apparently Leonis is the Americanized, or the Americanized version of Leonis is Lawrence. So that's now the theory of where Lawrence came from. So that's my story. So the point being, you may never know what you discover in these interviews that you have with family. And it's important to write it down. Those are the two things, especially as you get older. Your parents, I'm probably I'm probably older than many of your parents, but they'll probably understand that, the importance of writing things down and recording this family history. So, so this would be an example of putting that interview into an essay form, just like that. And if you have any photos that you want to share, you can add them too, and that's great. And then I did this little video. Oh, Aisha, cool. You learned new things when you were interviewing your mom too. Do you want to share that now? What you learned?
I mean, it's kind of related to what's going on now. My mom comes from the time where like the dictatorship was really bad. So she was the first woman in her village, like for 45 years, no one escaped Albania. So she was the first one to escape. I wrote about that too, so like I'll go more into depth with it, but yeah, that like her story of how she escaped and the day she got away, like just hearing what she did is it's crazy.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing and reading that, or if you do it as a video, hearing and watching it.
Yeah.
Thank, thank you. So I'll just play my short video. Like I said, it's just a synthesis. I didn't include everything in that essay, and certainly I didn't include all this latest information that I found out. All right, so that's my little 1 minute video, which like I said, you can do the same. You don't have to do their entire life history, just pull some pieces that tell the story. So that's your homework that's due this Thursday at midnight. And as I mentioned, this is kind of the theme for the week is understanding your heritage, your family heritage, where you're from, and how that affects your identity. So one question that I like to ask, and then we'll do a little quick poll, um, is what do you think it means to be an American? So we definitely probably have different interpretations depending on where we're from, whether we were born here or not, and how long we may have been here. So I'm going to do a quick poll. And then what we'll end up doing is creating a word cloud that kind of identifies everybody's idea of what it means to be an American. So you can enter, I think I said it, so you can enter up to 3 different words, but each time you do it, you can only enter 1 word. So think of maybe how you were raised, what you learned from school, think of the symbols of American society, and whatever your interpretations are, positive or negative. So click on that link, and then you can either enter your answer on your desktop, or you can do it texting on your phone. So take a minute. I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen for a moment while you do that. And if anyone wants to enter more than one word, you can do that. Right, I'm starting to see our word cloud appear. So now I'll share my screen. And keep entering if you're still thinking of words. All right, so if you'd like to take a look at the screen, I will share your responses and you'll see what you all did. So, by the way, and you can see this, they still keep popping up as people add. So it looks like freedom is probably one of the most popular words that was entered, and then maybe all the rest of them are not quite as popular. And I do see like some words in quotes. So I'm not sure what the was it I something country? Did anyone write that in quotes that you want to share? What, because when you do more than one word, it breaks them up. Aisha, what did you write?
Yeah, I like in quote, I live in the greatest country without backing it up.
Okay, I see. And I think okay. And you had it in quotes. Why did you do that?
Um, so like I don't know, there's some things, we have freedom, but to an extent, like freedom, for example, freedom of religion, but there's a lot of people who suffer for what they believe in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the freedom to like bear arms, but how many like especially African Americans, how they just get shot for nothing. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And that's kind of what I thought you might be implying by putting it
Yeah.
in quotation marks. And Marina says, I put freedom in quotations too for the same reasons. Yes, I was going to just ask about that one also. So, so this is great. So I see brave, compassionate, hardworking. I'm not sure what the having went with, but diverse, patriots, live, patriotic, free, diversity, lazy, greatest, lucky, backing. Again, that might have gone with something else. I see Wendy is agreeing with you, Aisha. Proud. So these are all, again, some of those ideas that we have and the mixed ideas that, like you said, there's freedom, but then there's quote unquote freedom, not necessarily that all people share the same freedom. So now, thank you for all your input there. That was fun. So now I want to go to a quick writing activity. So this is where we'll do just 5 minutes just because of time. So I have a Google Doc set up. I'm going to put that in the chat box. So reflect on some of these ideas, what you just typed into this word cloud, as well as some of those thoughts, like what Aisha, Marina, and Wendy were just mentioning. Right, close that, get that out of my. All right, so here's the doc. And this is kind of like another kind of version of a word cloud, all those different symbols that are associated with what it means to be American. Certainly, going to school every day in this country, almost every public school, you say the Pledge of Allegiance, and the flag becomes a symbol of what it means to be American. So for this writing activity, we'll just do 5 minutes. Think of your experience living in the United States and compare it to what you believe to be the dominant narrative. So that means like what most people think of what an American identity, what it means to be an American. So think about what you were taught growing up, what you did in school, maybe even the meaning behind some holidays like the 4th of July and Thanksgiving. So you could either do the free write for 5 minutes on a separate document, or you can do this. You can just, find a spot as some of you are doing and just start typing. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. so that you can all do that for 5 minutes. So we'll say it's 12:38, so 12:43. Maybe won't even need that much time. Oh, and also put your name either before or after what you type so that you can read it when I'll have the whole read around for everybody. All right, I'm coming back and I'm going to share my screen. It's like popcorn, like all of a sudden there's everybody typing everywhere and then it starts to slowly quiet down. So I think we reached the point where everyone has shared. At least there's plenty of people who have shared. So I'm not going to read all these out loud, but I'd like to hear what you've written. So we'll start. It looks like Emma, you're the first one. Do you want to read what you wrote?
When I think of being an American, I think of being proud to be American. History-wise, we are known to be very blessed for our land. Logically, we should be proud to be an American because of the advantage we have as a country, meaning that we are blessed enough to have a strong military, are able to import a lot of goods while also being able to export goods of our own.
Okay, thank you for that. And we'll just read them and then maybe reflect at the end. So Bree J, you want to go ahead?
When I think of the United States, I think of diversity. Yes, freedom comes to mind, but what stands out most to me is the freedom to be yourself. While we do have a long way to go, I think there are a lot of platforms and laws protecting your right to be yourself and express yourself. And then I think with holidays like Thanksgiving, we tend to forget the deeper meaning and the actual history behind it, and we just focus on more of the current and sometimes superficial uh, meaning, and we use it as an excuse to eat a lot, which is also really American.
Thank you for that. And Jeff?
So I wrote, what it means being American is having freedom, compassion, and respect for others. Growing up in America, I always thought that this is the greatest country due to its wealth, diversity, and resources. In school, we always celebrated Thanksgiving and 4th of July and holidays that represented America to its fullest. Now that I'm older, sometimes it almost feels like what we were taught in school was only half the truth. Today, I realize America's far from being the greatest country with issues such as poverty, major debt, and racism.
Thank you for that. Tiffany?
Okay, what I think being an American means is freedom, having pride, and being courageous. America is a great place to live in order to have a better life, especially coming from other countries who are not as wealthy and don't have as many resources as we do. You are free to be whoever you want in America, but for some, it's more of an obstacle because we still deal with racism, and that is probably America's biggest downfall.
Thank you. Marina? Are you able to unmute and read yours?
Yes. So I wrote, what I think it means to be an American is freedom, gratitude, and pride. Although many don't share this experience as an American, compared to other countries, America is said to give people freedom. To many countries, this is true because we do have access to many resources some places can't begin to find. But in America, there is a distasteful standard where everyone has their own attribute of what is ideal for each situation that affects many lives in many different ways.
Thank you. All right, Ian?
To me, being American is to be proud of where you're from while also being critical of what's going on in the country. Americans always have a lot of pride for their country, and while they may not always agree with the choices our leaders make, they will always defend it when a person from another country tries to criticize us. Being American is to be proud of your country while also having the freedom to speak your mind about its decisions.
Awesome, thank you. And Bree P?
I said from the outside looking in, to be an American is to have freedom to do and say as you please. Many immigrants come to America for the purpose of refuge, freedom, and to overall have a better life.
Thank you. Aisha?
I wrote, in my opinion, to be an American means having your own rights, freedom, and opportunities. A line from the American national anthem, Land of the Free, means freedom to many things, such as freedom of religion, but many people suffer for what they believe in. Freedom to bear arms, yet free to be shot at, especially if you are an African American minding your own business walking down the street. Freedom to say, I live in the greatest country without really being able to back it up. We in the U.S. have limited freedom.
Thank you. Shane?
I said to me, being an American is having the opportunity and freedom to do as you please with our rights to protect us.
Okay, thank you. And Professor Lawrence says, our country was founded on the values of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The idea of being American offers so many promises: freedom, human rights, participatory democracy. But in many cases, those promises remain unfilled. While I recognize my privileged identity as a white person and feel fortunate to live here with relative freedom, I'm ashamed of the failure of this country to offer that same sense of security for all people. And Jaden? Are you able to unmute, Jaden? I don't know. Go ahead. Are you there? Jaden, I'm not sure if you're having trouble with your mic. I hope you don't mind if I read what you wrote. You said, to me, being American is having freedom and an open mind. You can do and say as you please. You can live your life how you like, doing the things you like. Okay, I see your mic isn't working. Sorry about that. The only limit is our rights and laws that stop people from abusing their freedom. All right, Sam?
Hi, I wrote what it means to be an American to me is to have freedom, to be brave and tough, also to be able to be who you want to be.
Thank you. Melissa?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't write a lot. I just wrote being American to me means having the freedom to fight for equal rights and civil liberties.
Thank you. And Joelle?
I put being American makes me think of freedom, that you can make your own decisions on where you want to live, where you would like to work, and who you want to marry, etc. It means being brave and being proud of this country and being confident that we will succeed.
Thank you for that. Halil? Halil, go ahead.
Sorry. To me, being American means being part of a unique culture that was founded by individuals seeking the freedom to succeed and achieve greatness.
Awesome, thank you. Wendy? Wendy, oh, you're not able to unmute? Okay. All right, if you don't mind, I'll read it. I was taught that being in America is achieving a dream. As an immigrant from Honduras, my mom and I moved to the United States for a better life. It is the land of freedom. However, it is sad to see that there is still so much racism. And I see, Nihana, you're revising as we speak. Do you want to read what you've written and then maybe share what you were going to write? Your mic isn't working. Okay. Oh, Tyrick, if you want to go next, and then we'll come back to Nihana.
Let's see. Honestly, when it comes to being American, growing up, I was told that we're supposed to be strong and prideful with the things we do in life. But so far, the prideful part is true, but being strong is debatable. We're strong in different ways, such as our overly funded military, our strong terms of calorie with our foods, and our strong cultures too. We're known as a melting pot, a blend of all sorts of races, lives, and cultures, and some intertwining with another too. American pride is pretty strong despite our government being on our backs in life as well. We'll try to show how courageous we are to others and try to grasp and flex what kind of opportunities we obtain. But in America, we cannot hide that undertone of shame, weakness, and poverty.
Okay, thank you. And Nihana, are you? Oh, so your mic isn't working. Is it okay if I read as much? Hopefully, I see you deleting something right now. I'll read what you have so far. What I think it means to be American is to be free in your own skin, to be brave and confident in your country and what you can do. Being American means you have experienced life-changing struggles such as racism, which is still out there, homelessness, and poverty. Some people would say these struggles are what it is to be American, but what it really is, we'll leave that as a mystery unless you want to finish that. So these are awesome. I appreciate you all sharing your thoughts here. And it seems like there's, some similarities. Yay, everybody. Similarities in themes here too. So maybe we'll wait to come back and discuss these, but I'm glad you all shared your ideas. Because I want to make sure we have time to discuss the essay, and then I have two more videos too. So let me come over. We'll probably pop back to this document, but that was awesome. And great to see your thoughts and hear you all speak too. So we're reading an essay today, or discussing an essay today by Diane Guerrero, who is, if you're familiar with the Netflix show Orange is the New Black, she plays Maritza. Yes, Aisha. So like when I first started sharing this essay maybe 2 years ago, I'm ashamed to admit I'd only watched a couple of episodes of Orange is the New Black, and honestly, I didn't really like it the first 2 episodes. I didn't care about the character Piper. But once I got past, so then my students were like, oh, you have to watch it. So then 2 years ago, actually it was during the pandemic, that first summer, I binged over the summer and watched the whole series. I was like, oh my God, they did such a great job of dealing with a lot of these issues that you all just wrote about. And what she alludes to in her essay, as well as what her character goes through on Orange is the New Black. So I want to play this short video where she's interviewed, and in that interview, she gives some context for this essay. So the title, My Parents Were Deported, obviously that tells you what the essay is going to be about. But this background information also gives you some more details. So it's a little bit, almost like 4 minutes long. It gives you the emotional impact. So I've watched this many times and sometimes I get choked up. So I will just give you that trigger warning in advance. Nothing violent or anything that she talks about, but it's just very emotional.
Tell me about that day. What happened? You come home and you find the kitchen empty.
Yeah, it's weird because, as I said in my letter, I would always have like this feeling. I was always scared that my parents were going to be gone, that I was going to come home one day.
You were aware of their uncertain immigration
Absolutely. I mean, they
status.
would remind me every day. I mean, my dad had like this whole system, here's where I hide this in case anything happens, and don't be scared and know that you're going to be okay, and that we love you very much, and that we wish that this situation was different for us, but this is our reality. So yeah, that day I had this feeling. I remember I called my parents a million times. I was coming home from school, and I was really excited because around that time, I went to a performance arts high school, so around that time we were planning Spring Fest, which was like, everyone was getting their parts and their singing roles, and I was really excited because this was my first year, and I really was excited to tell them about it. And I got home and their cars were there, and dinner was started and the lights were on, but I couldn't find them. So it was really hard. It was really hard. And then the neighbors came in
And that's how you found out that they were gone? The neighbors told you?
Mm-hmm. They were just like, I'm so sorry, but your parents were taken away. And
What did that feel like? That seems to be every child's worst nightmare, that your family is taken from you.
Yeah. I broke down, I remember I hid under the bed because I was afraid that somebody was going to come for me. I don't know who that someone was, but I was just so scared. It's like, what do you do? And then I'm so scared for them. It's like what they're going through. My parents are going to jail, and for what? I didn't consider them criminals.
How long did it take for you to understand where they were? Because they were gone. The neighbors came over and told you that immigration had come and taken them away.
Yeah.
How much of the timeline? What was the timeline of when you then found out where they were?
Well, a few hours later of just waiting there, and the neighbors were at home with me, I called my friends and their parents. I was very close to them, and they knew my parents' situation as well. And I called them, they came over immediately, and they were just sitting there waiting for calls. And then finally I got a call from my dad, and he said that he was being detained, and then my mother called. They were separated.
I think no matter what side of this whole debate you're on, I think it's really troubling to know that you talk about this quite openly in your letter, that no government official, no government agency reached out to make sure that you were okay.
No.
You basically relied on the kindness of strangers to get you through high school, to go on to college, and fast forward. Do you see your parents today? You're a few years older now. It's been a few years since you graduated.
It's been a few years since it happened.
What's the status of your parents and your sibling? You have a brother.
Yeah, I have a brother, Eddie. They are in Colombia right now. I talk to them not every day, but we talk.
Do you go there?
I go there once a year.
How is that?
It's tough. You know, it's like, we've been separated for so long. I feel like sometimes we don't know each other. And it's difficult because I've grown up without them, and there's things about them that are new that I don't recognize, and it hurts. But I love them so much, and I just hate that they have gone through this. And I know I've been by myself, but I feel like they have lived a very lonely existence. Themselves. So it is so, what people don't realize, that it is so difficult for some people to get documented and to get their papers and to become legal. And my parents tried forever, and this system didn't offer relief for them. And what I'm asking for is to create or find a solution for families.
Right. So that's her, the background context of this. Aisha's doing the sad face. I was just going to say, does anyone have any reactions that they want to share? So maybe in our discussion of the essay, which is what she writes about here. And Melissa said, heartbreaking. Jeff says, that's so sad. To this day, she can't see her family unless she travels. Right. And again, she's an actor, so she can, to some extent, she has the ability to visit her family at least once a year. But just, think of your average family that would not be able to afford to do that. And Maria says, it was really sad, but you can also see her strength. Yes. Tiffany says, I think it's horrible that immigration just came and took her parents and didn't even wait for her to get home, considering that she was only 14. Yes, we'll talk about that with this essay. Emma said, I feel like she was trying to be strong, but couldn't resist to show her true emotions. Yes. Thank you all for those reactions. So she has become an advocate for changing these laws and laws around immigration. And as you saw from this picture, she's written her autobiography, In the Country We Love, where she talks about her experience. So if you're curious, if you want to read more, you can read that autobiography. But this is a piece of it from her essay, My Parents Were Deported. So as you know, she says she came to the her parents came to the United States with her older brother from Colombia. And then she was born in the United States. So because she was born in the United States, she was an American citizen. But because they immigrated without documentation, they weren't legally citizens. And that was why she was, no, I shouldn't say that. That was not why. Because of the system that allows this separation of families, they were deported back to Colombia, and she remained here. So that's the background you get from her video. So she tells her story. So this is somewhat of a personal narrative where she describes that experience, but then she also uses it to turn it into an argument essay where she's, like I said, trying to say that our system needs to be more just and compassionate. The immigration system needs to be. So that's where she starts, just this little anecdote about being an actor and then her story, which I just summarized, and the reasons why her parents came here, which is why many people come to the United States, for all those reasons that you described in your responses to that question of what it means to be an American, is that people are seeking a place that is where you can be yourself, that you have freedom, you have rights, you are involved in a diverse community, all those things, so many other reasons, but seeking refuge, exactly, Jeff. So, and that's the situation that she describes, that her family essentially was trying to find a better place to live because their home in Colombia was unstable and unsafe. And she, as she says in the video, she watched her parents try in many ways to go through the system, to follow the legal procedures. But even after spending a lot of money and time, they were still not successful in that. So that's one of those broken promises that, you know, we have this idea of the American dream, that anyone can make it here. But when you have a system that makes it difficult, then it certainly is an unfulfilled promise. So as she described in the video, and yes, like Tiffany said, 14 years old. And to me, that's the most appalling thing about it too. I get angry. It's sad, but then I get angry when I think about it. At 14 years old, she came home to an empty house, as she says, and she writes here, lights were on, dinner had been started, but my family wasn't there. I can't imagine the trauma a child would experience from that. And right, Aisha, you quoted, no one checked to see if I had a place to live or food to eat, and at 14, right. And Brianna says, where was CPS, Child Protective Services? Well, that is a question, and she doesn't say anything about that. Whether they got involved, I don't know, but certainly not at that moment. It was her neighbors, and if she didn't have the neighbors that knew her and knew her family situation, right, she would have been essentially left alone. But in many ways, she was left alone. Because she says, not a single person at any level of government took any note of me. No one checked to see if I had a place to live or food to eat. At 14, I found myself basically on my own. And so you can, you know, just imagine how dangerous, not only scary, but dangerous that could be for especially a 14-year-old girl. So she did find out her parents were in this detention. She could visit them. And again, still the system failed her there, that they were never reunited, and her parents eventually got deported. But then she does describe herself as being among one of the lucky ones. So this is where she says she was able to go to the Boston Arts Academy, the Performing Arts High School, and live with the parents, live with the friends of her parents. And she says, though I was surrounded by people who cared about me, part of me ached, and you saw that in the video, with every accomplishment because my parents weren't there to share my joy. So that's the day-to-day reality of that situation. And as she described, you know, they do try and call each other, and she visits every year, but that just doesn't suffice. She's not able to maintain the kind of relationship that she had. So each time I did this in blue, it's kind of like she tells her story, and then she gets to a point where she kind of synthesizes everything and presents her argument. So for this piece, she says, my story is all too common. Every day, children who are United States citizens are separated from their families as a result of immigration policies that need fixing. So obviously her point is she's not alone. She's one of many, but she was one of the few who was lucky. And she says, I consider myself lucky because things turned out better for me than most, including some family members. What does she say about her niece? What happened to her niece? So her brother had a daughter who was a toddler at the time. And so he got separated from his daughter as well. But his daughter was a toddler, and I'll just summarize for the sake of time. And she was then made to essentially no longer have a father, but she did have a mother. So that mother then became a single parent as a result of this deportation. So if you think about that, a young mother with a toddler trying to make ends meet and her husband being deported to another country. So of course, yes, like Wendy said, the daughter made some bad choices. So she ended up getting involved with the wrong friends and serving time. I shouldn't say the wrong friends, with, bad choices in life. She says wrong friends, whatever. But then as a result, serving time in jail. And she says, living the reality that she acts out on screen. But she makes this important point. I don't believe her life would have turned out this way if her father and my parents had been here to guide and support her. And that should probably be in blue, because that is a part of her argument too. Again, that the system failed her niece as well. And then she tries to make a connection to everyone. And I think this is important, but nonetheless, I wish everyone had compassion for people in this situation. But she turns it around and essentially says, it's not just in the interest of immigrants to fix this system, it's in the interest of all Americans. So if we think about those American values that we talked about, certainly one of the American values is this idea of having, it used to be the nuclear family, but at least family values, having parents that can take care of you, or having a family to support you in life. That is supposed to be an American value. So that's kind of what she says here. And this immigration system, as well as foster care, which many of the children of deported parents end up in, or she says even worse, the juvenile justice system, none of those are supporting families. And so she says, I don't believe, this is back to her argument, I don't believe it reflects our values as a country to separate children and parents this way. Nor does it reflect our values to hold people in detention without access to good legal representation or a fair shot in a court of law. And I think, was it Melissa, you had mentioned last week about the children getting separated at the border in Mexico, and being housed in cages, and certainly those tender age shelters, that euphemism, right? So she's alluding to that here, saying that, there's thousands of children that are there that have been there for years, separated from their parents. And how can that reflect these values that we supposedly have as Americans? So she wrote this at the time when, so this is a while ago, President Obama was in office. So this was an issue. So it wasn't just the Trump administration, but the Obama administration was separating children, and of course, predecessor presidents, same immigration policies that have not. They've been modified, but not to the point where they've been able to solve these problems. And then I highlighted this, keeping families together is a core American value. So that's kind of what she's pointing out in her argument. And then this is her call to action. So later in the semester, one of the essays you'll be writing, it's related to the environment, but you'll be creating an argument. And argument essays should or usually end with a call to action, what they want to be done, either what they want the reader to do or what they want an organization to do. And so in this case, she says, Congress needs to provide a permanent, fair legislative solution. But in the meantime, families are being destroyed every day, and the president should do everything in his power to provide the broadest relief possible now. So that's her strong argument. I think, and I kind of went through this quickly without getting any of your input, because I have one other short video to show. Is anyone familiar with the history, and I don't even know what the acronym stands for, but DACA, I just typed that in the chat box. So these are children of like people in the situation that Diane Guerrero was in, children of parents who are here in this country that are undocumented. So does anyone know the history of it? So a few of you have heard of that term. And then there's also that the Dreamers is another version of that. Sorry, my little earbud just fell out. So back in 2001, when this issue, I wouldn't say initially came up, but it became newsworthy and eventually led to the passing of this children's protection of undocumented immigrants. And it's because of this woman, Tereza Lee. So I think we have time. It's like 10 minutes long. I'll play her story, and then we can have any other final thoughts on this issue. So Tereza Lee will tell her story, and then you'll find out the history of DACA and what's happening now.
My name is Tereza with a Z because I was born in Brazil, and I came here when I was 2 years old. I'm a pianist as well as a mother of two and a local activist.
And as a child, I understand that you were undocumented here in the United States. When did you first find out about your undocumented status?
I first found out that I was undocumented when I was 7 years old, which is part of what I will be telling tonight.
And have you ever told your story or any story on a stage before?
I've never shared it on a stage such as this,
Yeah.
so this is goes down in my bucket list.
The theme for tonight is Take a Stand. So can you tell me about how you relate to this theme?
When I realized what it meant to be undocumented, I decided to stand up and say something about it and share my story and let other people know that this is happening to us. This is happening all around us. When I was 7 years old, my dad called my brothers and me into the living room for a very important family meeting. He said, "I have a very serious secret to tell you kids. You cannot discuss this outside of the family. We are undocumented. There's this thing called a green card and a citizenship, and we have neither. We're not technically supposed to be staying here. We're supposed to go to Brazil, where I was born, or South Korea. It's complicated. You cannot tell anyone outside of this family about our status. We might get separated. That is why you cannot tell anyone." The kind of fear that you grow up with as an undocumented child is all pervasive. I've had many discussions with my friends who share the similar stories of recurring nightmares, of paramilitary police raids, of our families being taken away, or worse. And with that fear comes a sense of isolation. Like many undocumented kids, I also grew up very poor. Our basement flooded every time it rained. We didn't have furniture or beds. There was no heat or hot water. Some days we went without food. And I remember my mom teaching me how to squash the bugs with my fingernails so that my hands wouldn't get too dirty. But what I did have was the piano. At that time, I started learning how to play the piano at my dad's church. And my dad was a pastor who was unable to gather a large enough congregation to apply for a religious worker's visa. But there was a parishioner who, after seeing how poorly we were living, she donated brand new furniture, including a piano for me. I fell in love with the piano, and it brought me joy and a sense of purpose, and even respite from the harsher realities of life. I started accompanying my church services and my high school choir. I won some local piano competitions. I also got a scholarship, full scholarship to Merit School of Music to study with world-class teachers, and also made friends there with other students that are passionate about music. And soon I won a very big and important competition, which led me to perform the Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto with the world-famous Chicago Symphony Orchestra. And I was the first inner-city kid in Chicago's history to have won. The artistic director of Merit School of Music, Anne Monaco, called me up to her office and asked what colleges I was planning on applying to. And as an undocumented kid, I didn't think that college was a possibility for me. And even if I did get in college and got a scholarship, there were no dream teams at that time. There were no undocumented activists. There were no support groups or public sympathy. It was just me, a frightened 17-year-old girl, and her confused teacher, who I said, I'm not going to college. And I left it at that. And Anne Monaco, she kept her composure and proceeded to print out 10 college application forms, handed them to me and said, fill them out as much as you can and bring them back to me tomorrow. I did as I was told. I brought them back to her the next day, and she immediately noticed the missing Social Security number. And I burst into tears. I confessed to her that I was undocumented, and please don't report me to the police, because I cannot be responsible for separating my family. Instead of reporting me to the police, what she did instead was to help me, and which led us to Senator Dick Durbin's office. Senator Dick Durbin's office looked into my case, and he saw that there was a broken and outdated, unjust system, and he decided to write a bill. And other undocumented students heard about this bill and started coming forward to share their stories. And Senator Durbin realized that he needed to redraft the bill into a larger bill. And that bill became known as the DREAM Act. In 2001, I was able to go to college. I got a full scholarship into Manhattan School of Music in New York City. And on September 11th of that year, I was getting ready to fly to Washington, D.C. for a hearing on the DREAM Act, when all flights were canceled due to the terrorist attacks. The mood of our country changed that day. Aside from all of the horrors that we all felt, what it meant for the DREAM Act was that any immigrant-friendly legislation was out of the question. But what happened after that, since then, over the years, dreamers started coming out of the shadows to tell their stories, to march and to demonstrate, and to support one another. And most importantly, to win public support A lot of us in the movement are starting to realize that the DREAM Act was just a seed that was growing and growing into a larger movement that is needed for a broader, comprehensive immigration reform. Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. So Aisha, you said good for her when she got that scholarship. Anyone want to share reactions to this story? Tiffany's applauding.
I feel like she was really nervous, like telling her story, probably what seemed like for the first time, just because it seemed like she was kind of like out of breath, not because like she was talking a lot, but probably because like of her emotions.
Definitely. I'm sure that was the case. And really, like she said in that brief interview at the beginning, this is the first time she shared her story publicly. So that must have been scary. I don't know about all of you, but the first time you ever speak publicly, no matter what the topic is, you're probably going to feel nervous. So yeah, she had that as well. And Wendy said, brought tears to your eyes because you can relate to some things. And Bree says, same. Yeah, I had to look at Aisha's doing the heart. No matter how many times I share this, I get choked up, and I had to kind of like compose myself for a moment there. So the DREAM Act, this is deferred, so and DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. That's what I looked it up on my phone as we were watching. And that's where the Dreamers, that term comes from. So the DREAM Act did pass, but it was just temporary. And I think it was President Obama that reinstated it again temporarily, and then the Trump administration ended this program, which made it legal for children to stay in the country. Marina said, you agree. She was uneasy about telling her story, almost still feels like she can get judged. Right, I'm sure that fear that she described of being found out, I'm sure that never goes away. That must be traumatizing to like think of what could happen. She described it as, I wrote it down, pervasive fear and isolation. So that idea that you can't, remember her father sitting down with her saying you can't tell anyone, it will, essentially mean that her parents could get taken away at any time. And that meant that they had to isolate from everybody. But similar to Diane Guerrero, they were fortunate to have somebody in two situations, at least, people intervened. There was the woman at the church who gave them furniture and the piano, and essentially that piano transformed her life. And that was one, like the good deed of the parishioner. And then there was the artistic director, Anne Monaco, who, instead of turning her into the police, intervened and went to Senator Dick Durbin, and he's still involved with the trying to reform the immigration system as well. But again, still, it's almost like things have gotten worse. It's like, what's the expression? One step forward, two steps back. It kind of seems like how things are. Anyone else have any reactions that they want to share? And Aisha, you said she lived in fear from age 7 after finding out to being 17 and trusting her teacher. Yes, so 10 years of that. And after she's missing her social security number, but now she can freely speak about her past and what she's been through to where she is now. And so that's a good point too, that as scary as it was for her, once she did allow herself to trust this this woman, Anne Monaco, with her situation, and then ultimately reach out to that senator, that speaking out and reaching out is what changed her life. So, think about it. Imagine if she hadn't. Of course, there's risks both for staying silent and risks for speaking out. but at least in this case, she was fortunate that speaking out had a positive outcome, and potentially a positive outcome for many other people just like her. And like she said, it kind of opened up the floodgates of people sharing their stories and protesting and doing marches, and it created this whole movement that has hopefully had an impact on changing society. Like I said, one step forward, two steps back, but it's kind of like the civil rights movement, which we'll talk about next week when we discuss racial justice issues, in that the speaking out is what's necessary in order to change the system. That think of many of the values that you wrote about in your response to that question of what it means to be an American. This idea of diversity and justice and equal rights will only be protected if we as Americans speak out, if we stand up for what's right, as hard as it is sometimes. And like I said, I recognize my privilege as a white person, and that's why I try to speak out. And I teach classes like this to encourage students to feel the same. When did you have a question? Raising your hand or comment? Oh, you were applauding. Okay, thank you. All right, so just because we're at that time, so 5 minutes left, let me just show you one more thing. So I put together this, I'll put it in the chat box, Padlet, which we probably don't have much time to talk about, but at least you can open it and see. So I put together this Padlet over the summer. I started collecting what are called counter stories. So that is a term, counter stories and counter narratives. So remember how I mentioned here on this activity, what it means to be, not here, that's going to be my other class activity, what it means to be American, the dominant narrative, that's what the majority of people believe, but then there's also alternative perspectives or counter stories or counter narratives, so you can click on those links to find out the definitions of that. But essentially, think about, history. It's usually told from the perspective of white male. That's like what we learn is from the white male perspective, and usually from those who won. So the victors tell their stories. So we don't, when we have the 4th of July, we also don't find out about, even though it was the idea of independence from England, we don't find out about Native American people who were living here before so-called independence. And same thing with Thanksgiving. We just find out about the Pilgrims and those who came to the United States and how the Indians supposedly were there to welcome them and teach them everything. Well, we don't find out the alternative perspective of how Native American tribes were displaced, and in some examples taken into slavery. That was actually the start of slavery, was enslaving indigenous people. So many things. These are the counter stories that we don't learn about. So that's why I put together this American Identity Padlet, and I'm always updating it to have a place to include many of these different versions of what it means to be American. So over here on the left, I refer to as the traditional American canon. So those ideas like God Bless America, the Pledge of Allegiance, and you can click on any of those and find out the history of some of those texts. And the New Colossus, if you the Statue of Liberty, that's the poem that's written on the Statue of Liberty. And this idea of manifest destiny, which we learned about in the Language versus Lies essay, where that was used to essentially displace indigenous people, but it was the idea of American, growing and prospering. So then I have examples of counter story poetry, and that's one of the longer ones, but the really long one, you can if you know of any songs that you'd like to add, please let me know, songs or videos, which have like these other perspectives of what it means to be living in America, and kind of some of the things that you talked about, that you wrote about in your responses. And then there's also examples of artists, some links to websites and podcasts. So a bunch of different things. Later in the semester, maybe even next week, we might talk about some of these questions, as like whose America is this? And this idea of history, like I just said, whose perspective is history told from? And you already saw this video from Jamila Lyascott. So a bunch of these I may share later in the semester. But feel free to play around, look around there. And if you, like I said, if it triggers some thoughts like, oh, I know the perfect song, let me know, because I'm always adding to it based on what students share with me. So in our last minute, let me just go over what your homework is. So we'll be discussing the essay Chameleon, which is written by Trevor Noah, who I hope you know, and I'll play a video from one of his performances, one of his early performances, that addresses this question of, he actually starts not just about what it means to be American, but he starts getting into racial issues. And then 3 poems. One is called Heritage, which is about the Native American perspective, Africa, which kind of what title implies what it's about, and then Pity the Nation, some of this mixed message about what it means to be American. So read those and respond to the prompt. So this is kind of like addressing the writing assignment about your heritage. So what's your racial and cultural heritage? How does it affect the way you see yourself? And then compare your experience. So think of one of these that resonated with you the most. So that'll be for your discussion board. And then continue, if you started it, continue working on your interview that's due on Thursday. All right, so we're right at the end here. Any questions before I end? I'm going to stop recording.